Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Ashafil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We concluded last week's lesson by looking at the beginning part of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's Mi'raj, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam traveled from the Haram, from the Baytullah to Masjidul Aqsa. And I mentioned that during this journey, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw some very terrifying and very horrendous things. He saw a group of people. Their heads were being smashed by large stones and by large rocks. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked Jibreel alayhi salam that who are these people, Jibreel alayhi salam replied by saying that these are the ones who would neglect their salah. These are the people who would not pray their salah and their namaz, and this is the punishment, i.e. their heads are being smashed with rocks and with stones. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also went past a group of men and women who were being burnt. They were in blazing furnaces. So again, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked Jibreel alayhi salam that who are these people, Jibreel alayhi salam replied that these are the men and women who committed adultery and fornication, and this is their punishment. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also went past a group of people. They had copper nails and they were scratching their faces with these copper nails. So Jibreel alayhi salam again informed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that these people are the ones who would backbite and who would slander and vilify others in this world, and this is their punishment. So in this journey, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw some very terrifying things, saw some very horrendous things, and then, as I mentioned in last week's lesson, he was being accompanied by Jibreel alayhi salam. They were on the Buraq, and they then arrived at Masjidul Aqsa. Now, Masjidul Aqsa literally means the furthest mosque. Aqsa, Arabic word, in Urdu means sabse zyada dur. So in English it means the furthest mosque. And this particular name was given to that particular area because it is the furthest mosque from Masjidul Haram, from the Baytullah. Now, Masjidul Aqsa is one of the symbols, or is one of the shi'ar of our deen, and is one of the signs of Islam. The same way when you look at a picture of the Baytullah, you associate Baytullah, the Haram, with Islam and with the religion of Islam. When you see Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you associate that masjid to be the masjid of Islam, to be a sign of Islam. When you see the Rawza Athar, the grave, the blessed grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you take that as a sign of Islam, you take that as a shi'ar of Islam. When you see a masjid, when you see a minaret, you know that Muslims gather in this particular area to pray salah. You know that the minaret is a sign of Islam, is a sign of a masjid. When you hear the azan being called, these are all signs and symbols of Islam. Exactly the same, Masjidul Aqsa is also a sign of Islam. It's also a symbol of Islam. The same way the Haram, the Baytullah, is a blessed masjid and is a sign of Islam. The same way Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a blessed area, is a blessed place, and is a sign of Islam. Exactly the same, Masjid al-Aqsa is also a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's a symbol of Islam. Now, Masjid al-Aqsa, in particular its virtues, is something which many people don't know about. Many people don't talk about. Whereas when you look at the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we can derive that in Islam the third holiest place is Masjid al-Aqsa. And the same way we have love for Masjid al-Haram, for the Baytullah and we have love for Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we should also have the love of Masjid al-Aqsa in our hearts. Now many people, when you speak to them about Masjid al-Aqsa, they're actually confused. When you speak to them about Masjid al-Aqsa, they go, okay, are we supposed to believe or are we supposed to love Masjid al-Aqsa? Shall we actually believe in the holiness? Now it's not that they don't want to love Masjid al-Aqsa, it's because they don't know about Masjid al-Aqsa. They know about the virtues of the Haram and Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the blessed grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But when it comes to Masjid al-Aqsa and that particular area and the virtues and the fazilat, then very few people know about it. And obviously I'll take this opportunity to say a few things about Masjid al-Aqsa with the intention to rekindle the love of Masjid al-Aqsa in our hearts. So that's what the whole seerah is about, to rekindle the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But also we'll take this opportunity and say a few things about Masjid al-Aqsa so that we can also have the respect and the honor of Masjid al-Aqsa in our hearts, the same way we have the love and honor of Masjid al-Haram, of the Baytullah and of Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and of Rawza Athar Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now there are many virtues regarding Masjid al-Aqsa. There is a hadith which can be found in Sunan al-Tirmizi, Musnad Ahmad, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that the Masjid al-Aqsa area, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that every single prophet of Allah has worshipped in the Masjid al-Aqsa, and similarly every single angel of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has descended in the Masjid al-Aqsa area and has worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now in terms of, as I mentioned before, that in terms of holiness, Masjid al-Aqsa is third in line. You get the Baytullah first, then Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then Masjid al-Aqsa. But in terms of the masjid being built, is actually the second masjid which was built on earth and in this world. It's mentioned in a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated by Hazrat Abu Dharr al-Ghifari anhu, that he once asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam which masjid was built first on earth. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the Baytullah, the house of Allah, that was the very first masjid on earth. Then Abu Dharr al-Ghifari anhu asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that what was the second masjid built on earth. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said Masjid al-Aqsa. That was built, that was a second masjid to be built on earth. And then Abu Dharr al-Ghifari anhu asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that what is the time span between the two masjids being built, upon which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said 40 years. As I probably mentioned before, in particular in the tafsir, that the foundations of the Baytullah was initially laid down by Adam alayhi salam. Later on, it was built in a form of a building, in a form of an imarat by Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. But the actual foundation of the Baytullah was by Adam alayhi salam. 40 years thereafter, he then went, Adam alayhi salam we're talking about, he then went and then laid the foundations of Masjid al-Aqsa. And then many thousands later, Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam then built the Masjid al-Aqsa. But the initial foundations was laid by Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. So in terms of like erecting the building, in terms of the foundation, this was the second masjid to be built on earth, and that is Masjid al-Aqsa. Another important fact regarding Masjid al-Aqsa is that the Masjid al-Aqsa, according to certain mufassirin, it was in fact the first Qibla of the Muslims. When Salah became obligatory, and we're going to look at this later, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was still in Makkah, so they hadn't migrated to Medina Munawwara yet. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whilst in Makkah, the Muslims, the companions, they would face towards Masjid al-Aqsa and they would pray their salah. So that was their first Qibla. And then even when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina Munawwara, the first Qibla still remained Masjid al-Aqsa, and it was 16 and 17 months after migration That's when the order was given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change the Qibla from Masjid al-Aqsa to the Baytullah. Another important fact about Masjid al-Aqsa, and also a very important virtue and fazilat, is that the Masjid al-Aqsa area, or that sanctuary, many prophets, many messengers of Allah, many companions and sahabas have been buried there. And it's mentioned in a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari that even Sayyiduna Musa alayhi salam desired to be buried near Masjid al-Aqsa, and his grave is near the Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem. It's still there nowadays. And I'll just mention the hadith, a very famous hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, that once Malakul Maut, the angel of death, he came to Musa alayhi salam, and he said to Musa alayhi salam that I've been sent by Allah to take your life away, to take your soul away. Now, obviously, if Malakul Maut come to you and I would be proper scared, Malakul Maut, angel of death is here. But what did Musa alayhi salam do? He then slapped angel of death. And it's mentioned in the hadith that he slapped him, that his eyes popped out. So the angel of death, Malakul Maut, he then went to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he said, oh Allah, like you sent me to a person, to a servant who doesn't want to die. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered Malakul Maut, the angel of death, to tell Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam to place his hand on the back of an ox. And then after he removes his hand from the ox, however many hairs there are on his hand, he will live for that many number of years. So if there was like 10 hairs on his hand, he will live for another 10 years. If there's like 100 hairs on his hand, then he will live for another 100 years. Now, angel of death, he came with this order. Then Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam then asked the angel of death what would happen thereafter. Then angel of death said, well, after that you will die. So Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam then said to the angel of death that in that case I might as well pass away now. You might as well take my ruh and my soul now. And he then prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, give me death or make me pass away a stone throw away from Masjid al-Aqsa. So this was the desire Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam had, that he wanted to be buried near Masjid al-Aqsa. Now obviously a prophet like Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, he's not going to make a dua, make me pass away near Masjid al-Aqsa, unless he knows some kind of virtues or some kind of fazilat of that area. So that's why Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, he made this dua before death, that Allah, if you're going to take my soul away, then make sure it's a stone throw away from Masjid al-Aqsa, i.e. near Masjid al-Aqsa as much as possible. And obviously this dua was accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as I mentioned, that Musa alayhi salam's grave is still in Jerusalem, in the old part of the city, which is actually, when you look at it, is very close, I think around 15 to 20 kilometers away from Masjid al-Aqsa area. Now just a couple of things with regards to Masjid al-Aqsa, and in particular the sanctuary, and there's something else which is known as the Qubbatu Sahra, the dome of the rock. Now when we say Masjid al-Aqsa, we don't actually mean the masjid itself. We actually mean the entire area. If you were to look at a map of Masjid al-Aqsa, if you do a Google search, you will see that Masjid al-Aqsa is actually quite big. The area is quite big. It includes the masjid, and it also includes the dome of the rock. So when we say Masjid al-Aqsa, we actually mean the entire area and the entire sanctuary. It's like when we say the Masjid al-Haram. So when we say the Masjid al-Haram, we don't actually mean the Baytullah. We actually mean the entire building. People praying salah next to it, people are praying salah in the first floor, second floor, and the top floor. You still call that part of the Haram, sanctuary or the Haram compound. So exactly here, when it comes to the Masjid al-Aqsa, when we say Masjid al-Aqsa, we don't actually mean the exact building. It means the entire area, which includes obviously the masjid and also the Qubbatu Sahra, the dome of the rock. Now the dome of the rock, I'll just mention a few things regarding him. This was actually built by a Khalifa, Abdul Malik bin Marwan, many years ago. That particular, the rock and everything, that was actually built many years later by Abdul Malik bin Marwan. But the actual place, the Jabal, i.e. that mountainous area where the rock is placed, that was actually a Qibla. So even when people, or when Masjid al-Aqsa, when people would pray in the Masjid al-Aqsa, they would actually face towards the dome of the rock and pray Salah. And even when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions were praying Salah in Makkah, they weren't actually facing Masjid al-Aqsa, the actual masjid building itself, but they were facing the dome of the rock, and that was the Qibla. And it's also mentioned that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, arrived there for the Mi'raj and then ascended to the seven heavens, it was from the actual dome of the rock. He actually stopped there near the dome of the rock and then he ascended upwards. Because the actual masjid itself, the Masjid al-Aqsa Masjid, it was actually built by Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam, and over centuries people have ransacked the masjid, people have erased the masjid, people have tried knocking it down. And it was during Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu's time that he then made the existing masjid which we see now. So the building which we see of Masjid al-Aqsa, not the dome of the rock, but there's actually a separate building that was actually made by Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu during his Khilafat. So that particular area, the actual building itself, that wasn't there during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went for Mi'raj, he actually stopped near the dome of the rock, where the dome of the rock is. He then went for Mi'raj there, that's where he stopped over. But obviously when we say Masjid al-Aqsa, as a whole, the dome of the rock is including part of the Masjid al-Aqsa. But nowadays people, they take the meaning of Masjid al-Aqsa to mean the masjid itself and the dome of the rock to be separate. However, when you look at it in reality, Masjid al-Aqsa is the entire area, which includes the dome of the rock. That's part of Masjid al-Aqsa, and also the masjid which was erected and made by Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu. So what I'm trying to say here is that this is a very blessed masjid. As I said, it's the third holiest in the eyes of the Sharia in Islam. And the same way we have love for the Haram, we have love for the Baytullah and Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we should also have love for Masjid al-Aqsa in our hearts. Now just very quickly continuing with the next part of the story, it then goes on to say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam he then entered the Masjid al-Aqsa compound and area, and he then prayed 2 rakat nafil salah. And the 2 rakat nafil salah was Tahiyatul Masjid. It's also mentioned that in another narration that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam got off from his buraq, from the animal which he was traveling on, somebody stood up and gave the adhan, followed by the iqamat. And there were many hundreds and thousands of people there. Their souls, their ruh were there. So everybody was waiting that who would go and lead the prayer, lead the salah. So Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam then got hold of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hand and he ushered him forward. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then prayed 2 rakat nafil salah. Thereafter, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, did you know who these people were? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied by saying no. So Jibreel alayhi salam replied that the people who were behind you, they were the Anbiyas and the messengers sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala since Adam alayhi salam's time. And this again is like another fazilat or another virtue of Masjid al-Aqsa area, is that it is the only place in the world, in the dunya, where all the Anbiyas and messengers gathered for Jamaat and for Salah in congregation. They didn't do that in the Haram, not in Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but all the Anbiyas, 124,000 of, obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the exact number, how many did he send since Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam's time, but they all gathered and they prayed behind Sayyidul Anbiya, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So again, that shows the fazilat of Masjid al-Aqsa area and also the fazilat and the virtue of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam finished praying his salah, he then met the Anbiyas, he then met the messengers. It then goes on to say that then there are two narrations. One narration, one hadith, then goes on to say that the Buraq was then brought to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then climbed the Buraq, and then this Buraq then ascended upwards to the seven heavens. Another hadith or another narration says that the Buraq was just left there in the Masjid al-Aqsa area, but instead from the heavens a Siri or a staircase came down. And it's mentioned that this staircase was beautified with emeralds and these kind of pearls and nice looking jewelries, was studied all around the stairs. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Jibreel alayhi salam then climbed the stairs, and then they ascended upwards towards the seven heavens and the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some ulama, some scholars then reconciled between the two narrations, and they said that it may have been possible that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on the Buraq, but he also took help or took assistance from the CD, from the stairs, and ascended upwards to the seven heavens and meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was making his journey up, it's mentioned in the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari that there are angels in the skies, and Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam knocked on the door, and the angel who was guarding the door of the first heaven of the first sky said that, who is it and who is accompanying you? So Jibreel alayhi salam replied that Ana Jibreel, that I am Jibreel alayhi salam, and I am accompanying Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The angel then asked, is he or has he, are you Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, been invited? Jibreel alayhi salam replied by saying yes. Then the doors opened, and then Jibreel alayhi salam and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered the first heaven and the first sky. And it's mentioned that in the first sky, as mentioned in the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Jibreel alayhi salam met Sayyiduna Adam alayhi salam. And then Sayyiduna Adam alayhi salam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they exchanged salams, they exchanged greetings. And in the hadith, it then goes on to say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw a group of people on Sayyiduna Adam alayhi salam's right hand side, and a group of people on Sayyiduna Adam alayhi salam's left hand side. And the hadith says that when Sayyiduna Adam alayhi salam would look to the people on his right, he would be happy. But then when he would look to the people on his left, then he would get sad and he would be displeased. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked Sayyiduna Adam alayhi salam that, who are these people on the right, that when you see them you are happy, you are pleased with them, but then when you look to the people on the left you are displeased or you are sad? So Adam alayhi salam replied that the people who are on my right are those people from my nasl, from my lineage, who have been granted Jannah and paradise. So when I look at them, I get happy, I am pleased that Allah, of their effort and mehnat in this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has rewarded them with Jannah and paradise. That's why when I look at them, I am happy, I am pleased. But then these people on the left, these are the bad people who spent their life in disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in not believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has punished them by sending them to hell and to Jahannam. So therefore when I look at them, because remember Adam alayhi salam, he's like the father, so obviously even though they may be of different background, different cultures, their skin may be different, but at the end of the day these are Adam alayhi salam's children. So therefore when Adam alayhi salam would look at them, he would feel sad. The same way if your child was in any bother, was in prison, was in trouble, you'll feel sad. So similarly Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, because he's the father of all mankind, when he would look at the people on his left, he would feel sad. So that's what he narrated and said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The hadith then goes on to say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then made his way to the second sky, the second heaven. He then met Sayyiduna Yahya alayhi salam and Sayyiduna Isa alayhi salam. And again the hadith mentions that they exchanged salams and greetings. Thereafterwards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then made his way up to the third heaven, the third asman, and he met Sayyiduna Yusuf alayhi salam. Again the hadith mentions that they exchanged salams and greetings. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then made his way up to the fourth asman, to the fourth heaven, and he met Sayyiduna Idris alayhi salam. Then on the fifth heaven, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam met Sayyiduna Harun alayhi salam. Then in the sixth heaven, the sixth asman, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam met Sayyiduna Musa alayhi salam. And lastly, on the seventh heaven, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam met Sayyiduna Ibrahim alayhi salam. And it's mentioned that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw Ibrahim alayhi salam, he saw him, he was resting against the Baytul Ma'mur. And I mentioned this before. Baytul Ma'mur is the Qibla of the angels who are in the heavens worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this Baytul Ma'mur is actually placed on the seventh heaven. And I think I mentioned this before in the tafsir, that it's identically parallel with the Haram. So just say, for argument's sake, if Baytul Ma'mur was to ever fall or collapse, it would collapse right on top of the Haram, on top of the Baytullah. That's how parallel it is. So that is the Qibla for the angels. The angels, they do tawaf of the Baytul Ma'mur. And it's mentioned that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam met Ibrahim alayhi salam, or saw Ibrahim alayhi salam on the seventh heaven, Ibrahim alayhi salam was reclining and resting against the Baytul Ma'mur. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will leave it there for this week. May Allah give us the tawfiq to act on what has been said. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
MashaAllah.